Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
This is one of those things that you never really want to do, but inevitably, it, things are going to happen where you need to. One of those is planning for a funeral. Nobody really wants to think about that, but there are so many advantages, especially after you pass. Your loved ones aren't faced with making decisions and all of that. In line with that is estate planning. What's going to happen to your assets, maybe your parents' assets, when you or they are no longer here? It's a territory that many of us know nothing about. Fortunately, this guy does. In the last couple of weeks, I have learned so much financially from this guy. It's like I'm so excited to start making money by just changing the way my financial situation is set up. I'm not even kidding. Like after our last conversation, I was on the phone with my bookkeeper. Like, what are we doing here? We need to change this. Paul said so. He is the Moses of finance, and he's back with us to talk about estate planning today. Paul Jervey joins us on the program. Hey, Paul, how's it going?
It's going good, my brother. How about yourself?
Real good, real good. And this whole estate planning thing, it's not fun, really. We know we have to do it, but we keep putting it off. Where's the starting point? And I guess it varies depending on who you are, your age, your situation, right?
To an extent, man. I would say if you are, a young person and you're either starting to maybe even just save a little bit of money and maybe you bought your first home or maybe you've got a child on the way or a child's here, you're newlywed married. At that point, it does kind of make sense to have a last will and testament. It does make sense to have a financial power of attorney or a healthcare directive. Like one of the stories that I like to tell people is that I had a young couple that I think they were in their mid 30s or something like that, and they had two kids. And we talked about estate planning quite often. It's a very integral part of financial planning.
Wow.
And they just kept saying, Paul, we're young, we don't really need to, worry about that. And we'll deal with it once you help us make those millions. And so I every year I always kept it right there on their checklist and kept talking about it. And one year they got into a car accident. And they both ended up in intensive care. Luckily, the kids weren't there. The kids were with one of their parents. But the wife ended up in a coma for several months, and he was out on long-term disability because he had to go through therapy and do all this stuff. And so they ran into a very, very difficult time just from a legal standpoint as to who was able to take care of the children, who could take the children to certain events, or take them to their doctors, who could pay their bills, who could, call credit card companies, electric companies, who could talk to their financial advisor if they needed money to come out, all those different things. So everything came at them at once because they hadn't taken this step to do estate planning. And what most people think that estate planning is, it's something that I do when I get old, and it tells everybody where the money that I'm not going to use is supposed to go.
Yep.
When estate planning is so much more than that. It really is that piece, but it's also incapacitation planning. So it's a way for you to prepare so that in that family's case, you don't have to repair. And it just created a cascade of events for them.
It almost reminds me of with your employer when you have long-term disability insurance. You're planning for the fact that you may not be able to work.
Yeah.
So this is planning in case something were to happen and you're incapacitated permanently or for a period of time. And how do we handle that?
Yeah.
And with that comes a lot of financial responsibility as well. I mean, take a look at medical costs and legal costs and all of that. God forbid something were to happen.
Yep, exactly. And the biggest thing for a lot of for that couple was who is going to be that person that I can designate to say, okay, I need you to take care of my kids. And if you don't have this stuff set up, then now if just say a family member decides to come up and do something, how are they going to get money to take care of those kids, to feed them, especially if it's not in their budget? and it's in yours because they're your kids. How are they going to explain to the schools if they have to drop them off, pick them up, because they don't just let anybody pick up your kids, especially in today's environment. So you need these types of documentation to basically make sure that all of your I's are dotted and T's are crossed. Now, it is highly crucial, I believe, to do it, especially when you're starting a young family. But it's also crucial to do it when you are starting to build up this wealth. And if, God forbid, you end up, let's say you have a life insurance policy that's worth $1 million and you got two kids and your two kids are your beneficiaries. Do you really want $1 million to go to two 16-year-olds?
Hmm. Exactly.
Yeah.
How about some of those terms? Let's look at irrevocable trust. That
Okay.
comes in under the category of estate planning, right?
Yeah, it sure does.
You hear all these terms. What does that one mean?
So irrevocable means that you are setting up a trust, and really all a trust is a legal document. It's a boatload of legal documents that outlines uh, if something were to happen to you, what's supposed to take place. And so an irrevocable trust means that once you set it up, you cannot make any changes. So most people will end up getting a revocable trust because that gives them the ability to make changes, such as changing who the beneficiary is going to be, changing the amounts of money who's going to get what. Maybe adding in there that I want this person to get this property, I want this person to get this business, and because the other beneficiaries aren't getting the business, we've got to be able to set it up so that they all know how they're going to get compensated. All of these different things. That's essentially what a trust does, and it also allows you to control your money from the grave. So when you have a trust set up, if you've got a child that's just not good with money, maybe they have an addiction or some kind of problem, you may not want to leave them hundreds of thousands, or even millions of dollars because it's going to entice that habit. So you can put parameters on this trust to basically say that I want this person to only get this much per month or this much per year. If you have an irrevocable trust, you can't make any changes. Once it's set up, it's locked and loaded, and it's almost like you need an act of God to be able to make changes to it.
Are you a fan of it? Are there reasons where you should have an irrevocable trust?
100%. So I have one. And the primary reason why is because of the size of my net worth. So if you're a person, like let's take an example in today's environment. This is getting a little bit advanced, but it's still good knowledge to know. So if you pass away today, you get what's called an $11 million and some change estate tax exemption. So when you pass and you have a high net worth, the IRS wants to be able to try and tax your estate.
Hmm.
So if you're married, then your husband or your spouse has one $11 million exemption, then you would have an $11 million exemption. So it's like 22 million. So the estate tax only comes into play in today's world if you have an estate valued over $22 million. But here's the kicker. In 2026, we have a reversal of the tax code. So meaning that the exemption amount is going to go back down to about 5 million and some change. So instead of married couples or single individuals having 5 million or a $10 million exemption, excuse me, a 11 million or a $22 million exemption, they're now only getting a 5 million or a combined $10 million exemption. So if you have a net worth over $10 million, anything over that 10 million is subject to estate tax at a 45% rate. So the reason why you would have an irrevocable trust set up is so that that irrevocable trust can own a life insurance policy for you that basically pays out to your beneficiaries so that they have the money to pay the estate tax, and then they keep the other assets that you've left them.
In a way, it almost sounds like a lock-in, like you are locking it in at that moment in time.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
It takes a lot of careful planning, to do this. And a lot of people don't even realize that they're going to be in that estate tax bracket. They think, well, I've just got my house, I've got maybe a business, I've got some real estate properties. We're under, $10 million. We're not going to be subject to estate tax, but they may have this huge life insurance policy that might be valued at $5 million. Well, what happens is estate taxes are calculated based on your gross estate. So your life insurance benefit is a part of your gross estate. So if you have that huge life insurance policy in your name, along with all of your other assets, somebody may be exposed to this estate tax portion.
Wow. So back to what you said a moment ago, Paul, there's a lot of planning that goes into this because once it's a lock, there's no going back.
Yeah, for that trust, you can definitely get another policy and so you can always get more policies, insurance policies to have your irrevocable trust owned. So if, let's say, like right now, I have $3 million in my irrevocable trust, term life insurance policy right now. Eventually it'll get changed over. But if in the next 10 years, my net worth decides that it's going to double, I may need more life insurance in there. So I can go to the insurance company, get another policy, and then have that trust own that policy.
Wow. All right. So other things that we need to be mindful of when it comes to estate planning. What else is important?
So what's important is number one, thinking about who is going to get your money and how much they're going to get. And is that money going to be a blessing or a curse? That's the first thing. Second thing is if you're concerned about probate. Probate is essentially where you leave money in a will or an asset in a will, and you have to have that will get recorded with the Register of Wills in your state. They then start the probate process, which is a 9-month process where they go back in your life to see if there's any money that you owe people, and people that know that you owe them money, they can attack the estate to get their money. If you want to have your money bypass that process, then you want to do a trust plan. You want to have a trust, not a will. So that's something else to think about. If you want your heirs to get the money, like almost as soon as you pass away, you need a trust. The other thing is who is going to be the financially responsible person to take care of my money if I'm not mentally capable of doing it? Who do I trust that much? And if I don't trust anybody, then I need to ask my financial advisor, what's a good trust company to use to do this for me?
Wow. I didn't know that was even available.
It is, yeah. Yep. So
what's the difference? All right, the thing just flicked in my head.
Yeah.
What's the difference between an executor of a will and a trust company? Are they somewhat similar or very different?
So the executor of a will basically gets the document, and their job is to open up the estate at the state level, make sure that whoever comes to the estate that says they owe money, that they get paid. And then once the probate process is over, whatever's left in the estate, according to the will, whether it's selling a house, liquidating a checking account or a savings account, that money goes to who it's supposed to go to. A trustee, which is, you kind of look at it as an executor of a trust. That can be an individual or it can be a company. If it's a company, the company is going to charge your trust a percentage of the assets that's in it to manage that trust. And they're going to fulfill whatever you have put inside of that trust. So their job is to make sure everything that's written in that trust actually happens. And a lot of people only use them if they have nobody that they can trust themselves to adhere to what's actually in the trust and to make sure all those things happen.
So I know a situation where a woman elderly had a will and everybody got equal dispersion in the will.
Mm-hmm.
There were two members of the family, her nephews, that didn't do the right thing and swooped in when she was sick and eventually had a stroke and persuaded her to change her will so that they got the lion's share,
Mhm.
millions of dollars in this situation. And this
Yep.
is close people I know. Uh, they, the two nephews, persuaded her to sign an irrevocable trust. And she probably didn't even know she was doing it. And
Mhm.
that was the lock. And,
Yeah.
as I understand it, when other family members would come to visit her, they would always be in the room to make sure that and nobody was saying anything. But she wasn't a full mind at that point. She was
Yeah.
probably maybe, 60% of her normal, very sharp capacity. They got all the money with the irrevocable trust. So they use that to their advantage. But I bring that up just to illustrate how critical this stuff is.
Oh
And
yeah.
yeah, you don't take any chances. This is life's work of assets and all of this here. And if you miss one little point, big
Big,
change here.
big change. Yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
you got to hire the right people. And just what you said before, I didn't know that a trust company was available. And interestingly, too, with the probate, that you have to wait. So
Yep.
yeah, the money's not going to be dispersed when somebody passes on. It's almost like a background check, financial
Yeah. Yeah.
background check.
Yeah.
Uh,
It definitely gets held up. Definitely
Crazy.
gets held up.
How about some other things that we should be keeping on our radar when it comes to this?
Yeah, so the healthcare directive is a big
Hmm.
one. Making sure that you've appointed the right person. Again, if you're incapacitated, to talk to your doctors. And one document that people don't necessarily think too much about is one that's called a living will. It's basically if you're hooked up to one of those life machines and they're basically telling you, hey, you might as well just pull the plug. They're not going to have good quality of life. That person can say, well, let me get three of different doctors' opinions, and maybe one of those will have an idea that could bring this person back to life. Or that person can say, you know what, go ahead and pull the plug and let them move on. So you can actually outline what you want them to do in that case. And so an estate plan is highly crucial for when you're younger as well as when you get older, but you want to get it done while you're in sound mind. And it's probably something that you want to have a look at and maybe even update every 5 years or so. So, one of the things in my practice is that we've been able to partner with a firm so that we can get basic estate planning and stuff done for our clients at a fraction of what it costs to work with an estate attorney. Now, a state attorney is sometimes definitely needed. I think when a plan is highly complex, and I would advise the listeners to sit down with an advisor to see if their situation is complex. If it's not, then you can definitely save yourself thousands of dollars by getting a basic plan set up through us, along with your financial plan, and have your entire estate plan created, how you want it done, have all the assets moved into your trust for definitely less than $1,000.
Wow. What I'm learning here today from you, Paul, is when we say estate planning, we think of immediately a house, assets, things like that. There's so much more that comes into play, right down to the living will, right down to your wishes and desires if you become incapacitated, in terms of medical proxy and all of that. I never realized that all of that came under the category of estate planning.
You got it, brother. You got it. It's a lot. And that's why it's hard for financial advisors to really market themselves, because there's so much that we do and so much knowledge that we have that it's hard to put it on a commercial. It's hard to put it on a document that can say, hey, we can do all of these things, for you. And it's really up to the people to decide if they want to sit down with an advisor to see what an advisor could potentially do. And if there's opportunity on the table for them to do something different than what they've done in the past.
How does the process work? Let's go hypothetical here. You have somebody who has some assets, not a ton of money, but they've worked all their lives. They have this. They're concerned about their health. Maybe they're getting up there in age.
Mhm.
Um, those things, and they want to make sure that maybe the money goes here and maybe not here. Um, in terms of working with somebody like you,
Hmm.
how do you break it down to those different categories? Like say this is finance, this is health connected,
Yep.
um, and how are you compensated for that?
Yeah. So the process in our office is we schedule an introductory meeting, generally over Zoom, or some people stop by the office, only about 30 minutes, and then we outline for them what the steps are. And the steps generally are going to be schedule a discovery meeting. In that discovery meeting, we basically send you a questionnaire and you fill it out for us. And we then meet and we give you a rough draft of what the financial plan could potentially look like. And we do like to give that to individuals as well. So we give that to them afterwards, and then from there, they would decide if they wanted to partner with us or not. And in those recommendations, it would basically say, we think that you should get a trust. And so we think that you should take that trust and move your property, your primary residence, into that trust. Maybe it's get a holding company and move your real estate properties into the holding company, have the holding company own the trust. And so these are recommendations that we recommend that you do. You can definitely implement them yourself, or you can hire us to help you do the heavy lifting. So there may be a setup fee based on complexity, a couple grand to get everything set up. If there's investments that we manage, we charge a percentage of the assets to manage it. But I'm a fiduciary as a certified financial planner. So that basically means I don't operate a commission-based business. Everything is fee for service. So it allows me to sit on the same side of the table with the client to say, okay, I don't care what products you use, insurance product companies, investment companies. If it makes sense for you, let's do it.
So let's say you have your assets and pick one of these companies. I don't know, Morgan Stanley.
Yeah.
It's all there. And the broker, I guess, is getting a commission from that. If somebody were to take that and move it to you from whatever company it is,
Yeah.
would it work the same way where you're getting a percentage of the investment, or is it more of a consultation fee that goes along with it?
So there definitely is a consultation fee with the discovery meeting. We generally charge $350 for just that basic hour.
Sure.
And the reason behind it is because we like to give you that rough draft of what we think that you should do so we can show you our value. And so whether they choose to go with us or not, they get to keep that rough draft. But then when it comes time to planning or transferring those assets, there may be a $95 account closing fee to close the account there and transfer it electronically. It happens in a couple of days. And yes, we would charge a percentage of the assets. It's going to be based on the size of that account, which would determine, how much we would charge. I know most companies like a Morgan Stanley or an Edward Jones or something like that, they'll basically do what's called tiers strategy. So, 1.35 might be for up to 250. Then for the next 250, it might be 1.25. For the next 500,000, it might be 1.15, and 500 above that, and it's at 1%. And then it kind of comes down. So you're still kind of paying over that 1% when you kind of do the average of everything. We try to do a flat fee across the board with what we do. So it's generally going to be anywhere between 1% or maybe even 1.5%. And the client's plan and the complexity all drives that.
Wow. Final question. We're out of time, but I this popped in my head. Somebody asked me this recently. Let's say you have investments, let's say an IRA or a
Mhm.
1K, whatever it is, with one of those companies, Edward Jones, and you have a TOD, which is terms of death.
Yeah.
What should happen? And you have your beneficiaries on there. Somebody told me that even though that's there, it doesn't necessarily mean that they would get the money. It could be another parent gets the money, an ex gets the money. It's not like an ironclad situation like a will. Real quick, 15 seconds, your thoughts.
They definitely would get the money. If they are a transfer on death beneficiary on an account, that person is entitled to get the money. The only reason, if it's a minor child, that money would get held up in the court of chancery till they turn age 18, then they would get access to all the money. But no, they call the transfer on death the poor man's trust.
You rock. You got the answers to everything. Next time, I think I'm gonna do that. 15 seconds. Give me that. Next one. On to the next one. On to the next one. But that's because you're phenomenal at what you do. Paul, how do we find you?
So you can visit me on www.genesiswms.com. It's www.genesis, GENESIS, WMS, William Mary Sam.com. You can also give the office a call, 302-543-7424, 302-543-7424.
Trying to do any of this without a professional like you is like swimming in shark-infested waters.
Absolutely.
It is bad idea. Paul, thank you so much. Always appreciate all your knowledge and info, and looking forward next time we get together.
Same here, my friend. Take care.
You too. We'll be right back.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
Mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house. And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned. This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.